We're on the chapter with Ramakrishna with Vijay Goswami. I think it's page 287. 280, yeah, 286 maybe. That's on my digital copy, though. I'm not
No,
real sure.
I have 172. What do you all have? Anyone else have?
Oh, 28. Okay. Anyway, we're on the paragraph where it starts in parentheses to Vijay. It is said in a song of your Brahmo Samaj.
Right. That's 173 in the big book.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. So we'll go ahead and start there. And he had just finished talking. He's talking to him about seeing God and about the fact that, I mean, the previous paragraph was really quite challenging. It just starts off. Oh, here comes Liz. Yeah, it starts off that one cannot see God if one has even the slightest trace of worldliness. And it's like, wow, okay, that's the truth of it. If there was no grace, and so we get as close to that as we can possibly get. And Thakur says if we do even just 1/16 of that distance, that he'll cover the rest for us. And so that faith is really in that. And we talked about that a little bit the other night, but it's really an important thing that a lot of this faith is kind of a knowing something or a trusting something that we intuitively know but have no evidence for. And by no evidence, it doesn't mean that we just take on anything. We've talked about the things that we take on are things like the idea of immortality, the idea of infinity, the idea of any kind of ideal, any kind of perfection, because we have no representative of any of those things in the material world. And so faith is to believe these things that we know, or to count on these things that we know intuitively, until they become apparent to us. It's those things that Swami Tattvamayinanda said when he told me, that God is obvious, but he's not apparent. And so we have to do the window cleaning of the mind so that we get this vision, we get this understanding. And I found, and I know it's sort of the nature of spiritual life, that as you grow on each, whatever the steps are or whatever the growth plateaus are, when you get to a new one or when you get a new insight, it changes. Sometimes it can change everything else. It can change. It can kind of have a ripple effect on your internal understanding of yourself or of the world or of God. And suddenly things, like a lot of things, can go deeper all at the same time, just through the inference or the experience of that new way of seeing or that new way of understanding that you've grown into in your practice. And so tonight he's talking to Vijay, and he was just telling the story about Radha with the ladies, telling them that if they painted their eyes with the collyrium of divine love, then they would see God. So it's like that collyrium is, I think, isn't that dark makeup that they put around the eyes, I think, to protect it from infection and from light. I don't know. Anyway, put that on your eyes. I know in India, some of the little kids, you'll see that dark line painted around
Yes,
their eyes.
it is, Maharaj. It is.
Yeah.
That is what it is.
Yes, and so this is to it's right seeing is what she's talking about. It's seeing things properly. Taking off the lens of attachment is really what it's about. Taking off the lens of memory, and so that you can see the moment as perfect. You can experience the divine presence in the moment. And so he goes on now. He's going to just give him 2 verses of a song that says, "O Lord, is it ever possible to know you without love? However much one may perform worship and sacrifice." And it's a very important point that he's making, that love is the fundamental thing in spiritual life. It is the primary, most important thing. All of the sages say it. All of the religions declare it. And it's something that's so easily forgotten because in our lives, in our relationship with the divine, so often we start getting focused on our own performance, on our own commitment, or on our own purity, or on our own, regularity in our sitting, and how long we sit and how well we sit and all of these things. And we get caught up in all of that. And we see it in the religious world. We start putting rules first. We start breaking people into categories and making those things more important. But by a huge margin, the most important thing in your life as a spiritual person is love. Love for God, God's love for you, your love for yourself, your love for others. And to understand that really brings things home, because in your internal world, love is the primary importance. And so that internal world has a lot to do with how you view yourself in your relationship with God. Love is the most important thing to the divine when he or she reaches out to you, touches you. That's the primary message that Thakur has for you, that Jesus has for you, is this love. And that it's not how much you perform your worships or your sacrifices or your meditations and things like that. Those are all done because of love. Because of love, not for love, but because of love. That this faith in the love that the divine has instilled in you, that unconditioned love, that grace that the divine has for you, that comes first, because that is what inspires a dynamic practice. That's what inspires a deep meditation. That's what inspires a pure life. That's what gives us the strength to overcome our desires, to be able to enact. What's that?
Maharaj, can you repeat that one more time? How we get that unconditional love? You said prayer and practices, everything is because of love that we are doing.
Yes.
But how do we get that love?
That love is what you
divine.
are. That love is what you are, and that love is what God is. And that's what we're talking about, this idea of faith. Faith means an assumption of truth. Okay, so when the beloved says in the scriptures, I love you unconditionally, I love you with a perfect love, that is fundamentally key. That faith in that means to assume it is true. So that when you sit down to meditate, the first thing, regularly, at least this is the work that I've been doing, is when you sit down to meditate, your first thoughts are of the love of God. Your first thoughts are to remember that you are in the presence of unconditional love, because God is love itself. He's perfect love, and you cannot have him without love. There can be no communion without that love. And he has already, through all of the sages and every story in the scriptures, I mean, my goodness, if you add all of these stories up from all the different traditions, God has done backflips, bendovers, pole vaulting. He's done everything to demonstrate that love, with the latest being or it may not be the latest being in Thakur. But previous to that, Jesus being sacrificed, and, Buddha giving up his kingdoms and his life. Krishna with the gopis, all of it,
Yes,
this
Maharaj.
is just, yes.
No, I know about the love that God has for us. But how, that is evident in every situation in life.
Right.
We feel that, but how do we feel that for him?
Well, if
That
you,
kind of,
yeah, no, it's an interesting question, because you can't know that from him without it inspiring it in you. Think of all these great swamis, I hear it all the time. Oh, he was so loving, and how do you feel toward these swamis that are so loving? How did you fall in love with your mother or your father? Was it not because of their constant demonstration of their love for you? That they fed you, they clothed you, they trained you, they held you, they built you up, they gave you what you needed. It's by recognizing that in your relationship with the divine, his love for you, her love for you, is what inspires your love for them. It's not something you have to do. If you sit and meditate on the love of God, if you sit and contemplate on the notion of unconditioned love, and know that love itself is God and that it's unconditioned toward you, and you begin to meditate on what that means, what does that imply? It's an amazing power. And if you are able to you will not be able to understand unconditioned love. I mean, there's just nothing in this world we can compare it to. And actually, the ego is destroyed in the presence of unconditioned love, because the ego simply cannot believe that someone would love you with absolutely no condition. The ego is going to insist on, oh yeah, well, God loves me a whole lot, but I have to behave myself. God loves me a whole lot, but I have to do my practice. God loves me a whole lot, blah, 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 blah. All of that stuff. The ego is going to demand that you put a reason for God's love in there somewhere. And so this is what the practice of faith is. It's to assume this unconditioned love fearlessly. That's when Jesus says perfect love casts out fear. That is because of that. The fear is the fear of the other, and love is unifying. Love is what brings us into unity. It breaks down those barriers. It's how oneness is achieved through the path of bhakti. It's actually how anything is achieved. It's the only motivating power in the universe. And so to love God, you just think about God. And by thinking about God, you take his word for things. That's faith. When God says, I love you no matter what, then no matter how dirty you are, no matter how impure you are, no matter how slouchy you've been in your practice, you sit down and you do not sit there and think about what you haven't done and feel guilty, or what you don't think about your faults and feel unworthy. You don't think about what you're not doing and feel like, oh, I have to do those things first. That's not holding love as the most important thing. That's holding your condition as the most important thing. Love is the most important thing, Thakur is saying here. And so in that relationship with the divine, by meditating on God's love for you, you allow the love for him to be inspired in yourself. There's nothing else that needs to be done. It comes of its own accord. How? Because you are the image of that love. The image meaning you are the reflection of the love of God. So if you are contemplating the love of God, you will naturally reflect the love of God back to the divine, because that's the nature of love. If someone loves you, it inspires love from you. And if somebody loves you and wants nothing back from you, that inspires a great love in you, great to the degree that you accept it, great to the degree that you understand it or know it through contemplation and through practice, the practice of assuming that God is telling the truth, and through the practice of meditating on the idea itself of unconditioned love, understanding what it means, and being willing to be bold enough, to be brave enough to really count 100% on God for your realization, to then allow your practice to come, not because you have to do it or you should do it or it's the right thing to do it or because you're hoping to get something from it, but because of the joy of thinking about unconditioned love within and having that awareness kindled within, that awareness of this divine love. It's the most beautiful thing that I have found so far in spiritual life. I'll say so far. I bet it's the most beautiful thing overall ever, but is when I came to know that there was nothing to do in in my practice but to stop everything. You know, just to turn the car off, turn the mind off, turn the body off, and just sit in the presence of perfect love. And what is there is a shocking response of love in yourself. As soon as you shut the mind up, you become aware that you are naturally a source of that same unconditioned love. That it's only all of the mental concern that you have about it that blocks it. Even one thought, that's why this verse here says, the previous thing says, he talks about matchsticks, if they're damp, they won't strike fire no matter how much you rub them together. The mind, with even one thought in it, will hold your attention and block your view of this perfect love. All you have to do is nothing. Absolutely nothing. And that's the hard part, but that's not a doing. It's an undoing. It's a silencing the mind isn't something you have to do. It's the result of something you've stopped doing. And that is being the source of your own thinking, being the doer. You know, owning your thoughts, thinking that they are yours, thinking that they relate to you, thinking that they're about you. They aren't. They're just a constant flowing succession of thoughts, of thinking, waves in the mind. And so to let go of that identity with them is all that's necessary. To come to that 0 point, you know, inside. So you relax into God's love. You don't worry about your giving God love. It doesn't matter. It's not about your love for God. This spiritual life, religious life, our time in this world is about God's love for us. But it's the same thing, because the more we understand that love for God, in equal portion, our love responds to God. It's the nature of our being. It's how that union happens. And when we finally have the faith to accept and understand a pure love, a love without a condition, then finally, despite ourselves, we reflect that pure love. It's returned to the divine. You know, and of course it comes up to that whole notion of like, also when Thakur says, you know, that we need to love God with the combined love of a paramour for her sweetheart, for a man for his chaste wife, a child for his mother, the rich man for his money. It's not that you have to go and practice those things. What you have to do is discern and understand that everything that you desire, everything that you're attracted to in this world is your love for God. You just have to recognize through discernment that your love is for God and not for the objects of your desire. That the objects of your desire are stand-ins or symbols of God for you, that you haven't yet discerned your way through, so that you think it's the object itself that you're after, right? And so it's not that we have to generate all of those 5 forms of love. What we basically have to do is consolidate our already existing love by discerning the presence of God in the objects that we are attracted to, that we want, or the actions or the conditions that we're searching for. They are all characteristics of the divine. They're all his name or her name. And so the practice is not generating a love that already exists in you. You are love, Satchitananda. It's the Ananda in you. We've been told that how long? How many times? You are love. How are you going? If you are love, if you are that reflection, that divine reflection, what do you think you have to build or create? There's nothing to build or create. There's something, it's simply something to allow. Allow your beauty to shine. Allow your confidence to shine. Allow your contentment to shine. Allow your infinity to shine. How? By assuming them to be true through faith until you experience them, until you see them. Right? These are truths that are obvious, but not apparent yet, because we tell a story to ourselves. We tell stories about our unaccomplishment, you know. If you sit down to meditate and your assumption about yourself is that you don't love God, well, what can you do about that? until you remove that assumption. You have to let go of the assumption that you don't love God. You have to let go of the assumption that you're not good enough, because you are, because it's not about being good enough. God said he would cover it. God said his grace is enough. So these stories that the ego is telling us to separate us from that power so that the ego can own our actions as the doer, that's what we're trying to overcome. That's what we're trying to allow ourselves to drop. Those ideas are only strong because of our attachment to them are strong. We're attached to being unworthy because it allows us to maintain that separation from God, which allows us to be the doer, allows us to be the actuator of our life, allows us to own our own power, right? We don't understand that the real way to our own power is through detachment, through surrender. Because ultimately what we're surrendering to is not God, but the very self, the very nature of what we are. That's what we surrender to. We give up all the blocking of the mind to surrender to what we call God, because from our perspective, we hold ourselves separate. But when we stop holding ourselves separate, we come to realize there is nothing but love in us and to us and from us and for us from this imagined external source, right? And so, but through assumption of that love, through the assumption of the nature of that love, we gain the confidence to let go. We gain the sense of safety and trust that allows us to let go. And in that letting go, we find our inspiration to keep going forward, to keep trying, right? What was it that when the woodman went into the brahmachari told him to go forward? So he went forward, he found sandalwood, right? And so he found sandalwood, but he didn't stop. He went forward. But see, the thing that kept him going forward was the fulfillment at each step, the sign that he got, that by going forward, he discovered something great. And because he discovered something great, he assumed that there was something even more beyond that. And so he obeyed again and went beyond that. And in each level, it got greater and greater, but he never stopped. Why? Because he's trying to contemplate unconditioned love. And so at every step along the way, as we learn a little bit more about the nature of God's love for us, that builds our confidence, that builds our faith to allow us to keep going, to keep letting go and keep surrendering at a more and more subtle level within, until truly we've surrendered the ego utterly and completely. And all that is left is the reflection of an unconditioned love. All that's left is an unconditioned, an infinite wisdom, and the beauty of existence, of being. Right? So this
Thank you,
love
Maharaj.
is, what's that?
No, I said thank you so very much.
Sure. Yes, this is the way. He says, if the devotee but once feels this attachment and ecstatic love for God, this mature devotion and longing, then he sees God in both his aspects, with form and without form. With form in the image of Thakur, without form in the embrace of love. A formless notion of love. So you see both. It's like you see Thakur's form, and that brings to mind this faith and this assumption of the unconditioned love that he embodies. And the returned love, the reflection of that love, this is the formless God. God is the love that is between you and the image of Thakur. Thakur is both the image, and he embraces you with the love that the image inspires. And that image inspires ever more love through your faith in the nature of what that image is, of what that ideal is of God. So Vijay asks, well, how can we see God? And Master says, one cannot see God without purity of heart. That's a surrender of the heart. A pure heart, as we know, no me and mine. And we get rid of me and mine purely through surrender, purely just through letting go. When any thought tries to enter besides love, it's blocked. Blocked through focus, through concentration, through discipline. And the things that come through the mind, we don't block those necessarily. They can't really necessarily be blocked, but you get tired of them. You let them be what they are, and they rise and fall and rise and fall. And after a while, they disappear because your awareness of them disappears. Your interest in them disappears. The outside world disappears. One cannot see God without purity of heart. Through attachment to woman and gold, to lust and greed, the mind has become stained, covered with dirt, or covered with thought, as it were, this addictive thinking. A magnet cannot attract a needle if the needle is covered with mud. Wash away the mud, and the magnet will draw to it. Likewise, the dirt of the mind can be washed away with the tears of our eyes. Right? The tears of our eyes comes, tears of devotion. This is a beautiful thing to know. Tears of devotion come from the outside of the eye. Tears of suffering come from the inside of the eye. And if you're deep in meditation, contemplating the love of God, the amazement that God could love you as you are without a change necessary in you will move you to tears. And those tears wash away your doubt. Those tears wash away your dependence on performance, on condition to love God. So as you contemplate that pure love and understand what that means, and you allow yourself to receive that, and you allow yourself to open to that, and you give yourself the courage to believe that you need do nothing, right? But you have to be careful. This is not a difference, but the important thing is that it's not the you doing nothing that's important. It's the love that's important. When we hear that, when we say that God's love is unconditioned, you don't have to do anything in response. It's funny because the mind clings on to that notion. Oh God, I don't have to do anything. It makes that the important piece of information. and that's when we'll go astray, because then the mind, the ego, will take that, oh, I don't have to obey anything. I can do whatever I want. And God loves me so much. We've let love become second, and we've let the doing nothing become primary. And so that's what we don't want to happen. That's why he says there's no way to see God unless love is first, unless that's primary. So we're always thinking of the perfect love of God. We're not thinking about the license that we could abuse by having the ability to do anything we want, even though it's absolutely true. You could do anything, but you wouldn't ever realize God if you just did everything, because you would have made doing everything more important than the love that God has for you. You would have turned inspiration into license. And that would cause you some pain, because license is not the nature of love. You don't respond to somebody who's forgiving and loving to an infinite degree by taking advantage of them. That's not love. That's not understanding love. That's not putting love first. That's not honoring love, right? And so in God's unconditioned love for us, that's all we think about. We know that we need not do anything. That's the assumption. That's the surrender. That's the opening. But we keep the love of God primary in our mind. And then the proper reaction, the proper response, rather, of love will happen of its own accord, because you are Satchitananda, because it is your nature to respond to love with love. It is your nature to finally understand that you are the love that you're accepting. Wash away the mud, and the magnet will draw to it. Likewise, the dirt of the mind can be washed away with tears of our eyes. This stain is removed if one sheds tears of repentance and says, God, I shall never again do such a thing. Therefore, God, who is like the magnet, draws to himself the mind, which is like the needle. Then the devotee goes into samadhi and attains the vision of God. You see, so we've got all of that going on, all the things that we've just mentioned, going on in succession there. He draws to himself the mind, which means the thoughts will diminish. The thoughts will rest in love. He draws the mind, which is like the needle. Then the devotee goes into samadhi. The absence of thought is samadhi, because it's the manifestation, a direct manifestation of eternity. It's the direct manifestation of an unconditioned love within. It's the absolute seeing. It's like touching a wire that has no insulation on it. You have a direct experience of Satchit Ananda, which is not only your image, what you are, it is the presence of God within you also. And you understand that ultimately the samadhi is knowing there's no difference between the two parts of that statement. There is no difference between the Satchitananda that's reflected in you and the Satchitananda that is God. They are one and the same. You may try 1,000 times, Thakur says, but nothing can be achieved without God's grace. Yes, you see, this trying 1,000 times is how you arrive to the notion that nothing can be done without God's grace. You know, how long we've been working, I've seen in my own practice that even as we gain more and more self-control, and even as we become more and more virtuous in our actions, that the levels just change. It becomes more and more subtle. It becomes more and more inward. But the intensity of your shortcomings will always seem the same to you, right? The purier you get, you start discovering more impurities that you had not been aware of within yourself, because you hadn't had the clarity of mind even to recognize them. And you'll start uncovering ones that you long ago stopped paying attention to. And if your reaction to them is always a self-hatred or a self-disappointment or a self-judging, then it's just one pain after another pain after another pain. Because, you know, when you're at the gross level, meaning you're just trying to not kill somebody, you know, that's the best you can do at first. I'm just not going to kill somebody. And you don't kill somebody, you feel a great deal from that. But if you kill them, of course, you feel horrible. Well, then, you know, after you've stopped killing people, you come to the next subtle step, which is to not think about killing people, right? And then you manage to stop thinking about killing people, and you realize that killing someone is the same as being as having wrong thoughts about them or mean thoughts about them. And so now you're at the place where your mean thoughts about people are disturbing you and hurting you as much as the killing of people did earlier. You see, so the fight just keeps getting more and more subtle. So the answer is not this succession of subtler and subtler and subtler. It's to bring you to the understanding that this is going to be done because of God's grace. So what is God's grace? His promise of an unconditioned love for you. His promise that you are in my lap when you close your eyes for meditation. You are in my presence when you wash the vegetables, when you step out of the shower. You are in my presence always and forever. And the more you think of that, the more you know of that, the more you rest in that, the greater your awareness of grace is, the greater your awareness of love is. It's not that God's love becomes greater. It's not that his grace becomes greater. It's that your awareness of an infinite and eternal grace becomes greater. Your awareness of an unconditioned and infinite love becomes greater. And in that greater experience or knowledge or trust or faith in that grace and love, your response is greater. Just because you are the image, which means you're the reflection. If I shine a light on a mirror and I turn the brightness of that light up, the brightness of the light in the mirror is going to go up as well. Why? Because it's the nature of the mirror. It reflects what's being shined on it, what's being shown on it. So for you, for us, how do we get greater love? It's by recognizing and knowing the brightness of the love that is shining on us, the mirror. We are the image. We are the mirror. We are the reflection of God. And so the more we know of God, the more we trust that nature of love, the more we have established ourselves in the thought and presence of God, then God is what is reflected in us. God is what everybody sees in us. One cannot see God without his grace. Is it an easy thing to receive the grace of God? You see, now it's not interesting because it's not that, is it an easy thing for God to have grace for us? God's grace is a fact. Is it easy thing to receive the grace? What is it to receive the grace? It's to open to the grace. I have that nice little ditty that I like to repeat to myself. Infinite grace requires infinite humility on the part of the receiver. For you to receive infinite grace, that means you have to believe yourself to be infinitely open to it, which means you know that you can't do anything of your own accord, which you rest easy in the fact because of your confidence in the nature of unconditioned love, you let go of even trying. You're not the doer, so you need not try like that. You simply need to understand how deep this grace from God is, and you just need to keep surrendering to it. Allow it to be the reason for everything. There is no response. It's just an opening to. The response comes only because you are the image of. You are the reflection of your knowledge of love. You are the reflection of your faith in grace, your faith in this beautiful beloved.
Can I interrupt you, Swami?
Please.
There's this really wonderful quote from Eternal Companion that I feel like needs to be shouted from the rooftops that has to do with this. It's like one time I read it and I was like mind boggled, but there's this question, and in response, Swami Brahmananda says this. He says, every day, something like, I have the exact quote, but I don't know what he says to do with it. But he says, pray, O Lord, make me able to understand and receive the grace which I know you are ready to give me. Yes. So beautiful. I love that prayer so much.
That's right. And that knowing that you are willing to give me is what we're talking about. That's your ability to receive it, to know that God is ready to give it, to have faith that God is giving it. That is what actually allows you to recognize it, to experience it. It is already there. That's why in that book, Zen Practice, the first book, the first chapter, and I just keep bringing this stuff over and over until we understand it. We don't sit to realize God. We sit to know that we're already realized. And what does that knowing we are already realized means? It means that we open up to an accepting of God's gift of our realization. We open up to the reality of the gift of God's infinite love. We open up to the security, to the fearlessness of knowing God's infinite grace. Right? And so this is that process. One cannot see God without his grace. Is it an easy thing to receive it? Is it an easy thing to open to it? One must altogether renounce egotism. What is egotism? It's the sense of doership. It's the sense of actualization. I'm the one doing this. I'm the one trying to love God. I'm trying to make my love for God greater. I'm trying to make my love for God, stronger. That's egotism, because it's still leaving you in the position of the doer. You're not surrendering into the position of the reflector. Your only job is to be absolutely clear and free. That's to get rid of egotism. Egotism is the pure awareness of the presence in the moment. There's no thought of past. There's no thought of future. There is simply a complete embrace of the moment in the divine presence as the manifestation of the divine presence. One must altogether renounce egotism. One cannot see God as long as one feels, I am the doer. I'm the one making this relationship with God happen. I'm the one generating love for God. I'm the one doing my meditation. I'm the one not falling to lust and greed. I'm the one who's doing my practice 3 times a day. All of that doership is egotism. All of that idea of you actualizing God, being the one responsible, is egotism. You're letting everything drop off so that you can be a great mirror, right? You don't want the mirror combing your hair. All right. You want the mirror just to reflect a reality. And the reality is your hair's already combed. It's already done. One must altogether, okay, altogether. That means from every angle, absolutely, altogether renounce egotism, right? If you drop something, you altogether drop it. That means you just, poof, you completely let go, you let it drop. This is what he's saying. You must altogether drop the idea of being the doer in your relationship with God. Suppose in a family, a man has taken charge of a storeroom. Then if someone asks the master, "Sir, will you yourself kindly give me something from the storeroom?" The master says to him, "There is already someone in the storeroom. What can I do there?" It's already done. It's already finished, right? There's nothing to give, nothing to take. There's a reality to realize, to open to accept, to have faith in. God doesn't easily appear in the heart of a man who feels himself to be his own master, right? So if you're your own master, where is grace? If you're your own master, where is the infinite love of God? If you've already got your shopping bag partway full, where are you going to put all of your groceries? You know, it's like you have to go to God empty so that infinite grace will fit in your infinite self, so that infinite love will fit in your infinite self, so that infinite wisdom will fit in your infinite self, because it won't fit into anything finite. Your body and mind are finite. They cannot hold it. They must be renounced. God doesn't easily appear in the heart of a man who feels himself to be his own master, but God can be seen the moment his grace descends. He is the sun of knowledge. One single ray of his has illumined the world with the light of knowledge. That is how we are able to see one another and to acquire varied knowledge. One can see God only if he turns his light toward his own face. This is going within. What is your face? Not this one, of course, but this is metaphorically your face. To turn, I love that sentence. Turns his light toward his own face. You know, just turn your own light toward your own face. It's know that you already have this. You are this. And the awareness is not for something out in front or apart from you. It's an awareness that is the source of that which is the very source of you. It's an awareness that happens in silence. Silence of the mind, silence of the senses, which is the same thing. Silence of the thinking processes, the stories of ego, the silence of any I. That's where this becomes, that's how we become aware of this. We don't do something to become aware of the presence of God. We simply stop everything that's blocking it. Not a single thought in the mind, an absolute stillness. And in that absolute stillness, God becomes apparent. That which is obvious becomes apparent to us. She's saying, and interestingly enough, there's a little bit of a clue here when he says one single ray of his has illumined the world with the light of knowledge, which means even this place that we call delusion, even this place where we're depending on the thoughts of our mind for our identity, even that is God. You see, so it's just an understanding of the nature of even that. All of these things are pointing at this truth. Nothing that you experience is pointing to anything but this truth. When you see it in silence, not calculating it, not analyzing it, just letting it be, right? Letting it be, accepting it. The police sergeant goes his rounds in the dark of night with a lantern in his hand. No one sees his face, but with the help of that light, the sergeant sees everybody's face. And others too can see one another. If you want to see the sergeant, however, you must pray to him. Sir, please turn the light on your own face. right? Where is your light? Your light is your awareness. What are you aware of right now? Stop right now for a second. Pay attention to what you're aware of. All of it is outside of yourself, is it not? You're paying attention to the screen. You're paying attention to feelings. You're paying attention to thoughts and ideas and philosophies and sound, and comfort. Your light is facing outward. You're looking and you're illuminating the face of the whole world, but you're not illuminating your own face. If you want to see your own face, take the awareness that you're distributing outside right now to all of these things and turn it inside. Become aware of the silence inside. Become aware of the contentment inside. Become aware of that stillness, that atmosphere of the temple within the body. Become aware of that. Turn that light inward and see it. Turn the light toward your own face. And others, if you want to see the sergeant, however, you must pray to him, please turn the light on your own face. Let me see you. In the same way, one must pray to God, O Lord, be gracious and turn the light of knowledge on yourself, that I may see your face. A house without light indicates poverty. So one must light the lamp of knowledge in one's heart. As it is said in a song, lighting the lamp of knowledge in the chamber of your heart, behold the face of the mother, Brahman's embodiment. As Vijay had brought medicine with him, the master asked a devotee to give him some water. He was indeed a fountain of infinite compassion. Okay. Did you hear that? Infinite compassion. Can you describe infinite compassion? This is what is said of the divine, of the bliss within. It's an infinite compassion for you. It's an infinite compassion. That's what we get lost in. That's what we receive ourselves into. That's what makes the outside world disappear. He had arranged for Vijay's boat fare since the latter was too poor to pay for it. Vijay, Balaram M., and the other devotees left for Calcutta in the country boat. And we'll stop there for tonight. This is the whole practice of what is happening within us. At present, we still have that egotism. So we think that we're doing our practice, that we're loving God, that we're approaching God, that we're praying to God. And that's fine, because God is in there. God is that. And it's vidya, it's light, it's moving us in the right direction, right? Don't always know that you're in the hand of God right now. Don't worry about what you perceive to be wrong or missing. Be aware of God, and the rest is going to take care of itself. The rest is going to fix itself, because that awareness itself is the light of the beloved. Just simply constantly be aware of awareness. Be aware of the presence of God, the presence of the divine within. Have faith in that being what you are. Allow yourself to contemplate it always, without any other thought, building castles of philosophy in your mind, or castles of relational understanding, as it was. This single ray knowledge of God. We're going for the full lantern experience. That's a good name of a book. The Full Lantern Experience. All right. So lighting the lamp of knowledge in the chamber of your heart, behold the face of the mother, Brahman's embodiment. Beautiful. Any more? Anybody have something to add or say or question or wonder? Or...
I have a question.
Yes.
Just to clarify, Maharaj, when he said that there is already somebody in the storeroom,
Yes.
does that mean our ego? So that he's asking the master to come and get something from the storeroom. And the master is saying there is somebody already in the storeroom.
Right.
So does that mean that is because your ego is there I cannot come in there? Is that what it is? You
No, I
already
think
have,
yeah, but probably we could come up with a story that would work with that idea. But the way that it strikes me initially is he's saying it's not necessary. You see, if there was nobody in the storeroom and somebody had to go in the storeroom and get that, there's a doership in there. There's something that has to change as such. But the reality already exists within you. Nobody has to be sent to run and get it. Nothing has to be done. It has to simply be realized, simply accepted. You know, nobody has to go and do anything. God doesn't have to go and do anything in that sense in the storeroom. Your storeroom's full and you have full access to it, and the presence is already there. You don't have to ask God, because he's not out here where you're praying to him. He's in here hearing you. He said, there's somebody already in there. You know, you think I'm out here. I'm not going to tell you anything right now. We'll just let that be. But I don't have to go anywhere. I'm where I should be. You're where you should be. Just go to the store. Just be in the store. Just know that this is already there. It's already happening.
just love the way how you give a positive twist to every incident that is mentioned in there.
Yeah, I'd love to be responsible for it. Somebody else wrote it though. But yeah, no, this is the nature of God. God is infinitely positive.
Knowing the understanding of it, I am, the
Um,
explanation of it. You give a positive. I have heard it from many people. It is saying, oh, because you think you are doing it, God is not to come in there. Because you have to get rid of that ego first, then God will come to help you. So you are saying there is no need for it. It is already there. It is already
yeah,
yours
well,
to
yeah,
hold and
because
take it.
because
Oh,
to
beautiful.
think that you had to do something to
Yes.
actuate God, that's the egotism.
Yes.
That's the sense of doership, right? That's the sense of doership. We, as far as our ego goes, you know, as long as it exists, we have to make it a lover of God. That will be enough. Why? Because God's doing already. God, the truth already exists within us. So we have to play some games with ourselves in the sense that we have to continue with vidya until we're able to set down the idea of doership. You know, and what is that? It's really the sense of like, oh, I've got to do all of this. Well, really, what you're doing is undoing what you've already mistakenly done. You know, it's like you made the mess to clean up. It's not that there was a mess to clean up that you have to do like that. But even that is not necessary. It's the faith that's necessary. It's the faith in an unconditioned love, a faith in immortality, a faith in your infinity, a faith in your wisdom. That has to be allowed to be true. Let's put it that way. So the work that you're doing is allowing these things to be true within yourself, allowing the presence of God to be apparent to yourself. When your clouds of thought come in, self-condemnation or listing off the things that all have to be done, your work is to deny them, to say, no, that's not true. That's just a story. God is here. I feel that love. And just turn to that face within and say, I feel the love. And tell me honestly that you don't feel it. You will feel it. That act of faith is always rewarded. Mother always reaches out to touch the child when the child turns to her and reaches or cries. You know, Mother is there. Stop listening to the voices. Stop listening to the stories. Stop listening to the thoughts. And insist on the presence. Block them out just by insisting on the presence. And that mother will laugh. She'll giggle. And you'll hear it. And you'll feel it. And that's how that love that is already in you becomes apparent to you. And from the ego perspective, it might look like you're growing it, or that it's increasing in you because of what you're doing. But it's not. It's because you're letting go of the story that you're becoming ever more aware of the greatness of this infinite love, of the intensity of this love, the intensity of this isness, this being. So it's an illusion of doership, but it's really just surrender. There's no doership in surrender. Waving the white flag is not doing something. it's just your symbol of surrender. And so this is what our practice is. Our practice is our symbol of our surrender. It's our white flag. We sit down to wave our white flag. And Mother, that means Mother's in charge. I'm not doing, I'm surrendering. I'm opening to, I'm becoming aware of, and allowing grace, allowing love to be my only justification for myself. So that when I approach, I approach that gate of heaven, I don't sit there and list off all the good things that I've done. I simply say, I have a ticket. And that's it. It's because you have a ticket that you get in.
Thank you.
All right. Very good.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Jai Ma, Jai Thakur, Jai Swamiji. Be well.
Thank you so much.
Mm.